Good afternoon and welcome to this installment of the lunch series. And today we're going to be talking about home lawn fertilization. And so we will get started. So an overview of what we're going to talk about, soil testing. If you were to walk into any UT Extension office in the entire state of Tennessee, and you go in and ask them, hey, I need some help with my lawn or with my field, the first thing that any extension agent is going to tell you is, well, we need to do a soil test. Then we're going to talk about some of the plant nutrients, the major nutrients that we kind of look at, talk about some different fertilizer sources, how to apply the fertilizer. Also, we apply lime in our yards, and then just some management tips. So, first of all, fertilizing and liming is based on a soil test, and it's critical to anytime you want to establish or just maintain the lawn that you already have. By liming and fertilizing, your lawn is going to be greener, it's going to be healthier, you're going to have less weeds, and it's just going to be prettier, just more attractive to look at. So some of our primary nutrients that we're going to discuss today are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Whenever we talk about lime, so any kind of normal weathering of soils, it's going to lower that soil pH over time. Anytime that you have a pH of less than 6.1, whenever you're establishing a lawn, it is recommended to lime. So, conducting a soil test. Why? The first reason is that cost efficient. What I usually tell people is you don't want to waste any money on any nutrients that you may not need. I usually kind of laugh and joke and say, well, if you want to apply, a triple 15 out there every year, just hand me the money, because you probably don't need, that triple 15 every year. Also, so many decisions nowadays are based upon water quality and also being friendly to our environment. You don't want to apply or over apply any nutrients. And that's just because you don't want to overload what grass you've already got. You don't want to have any burn issues. And then also, if you apply your fertilizer lime right before a rain, and then we get a big rain like we've been having, you could wash everything off, and then that goes into our water system. So you don't want those nutrients to run off. And then the third reason why you should soil test is because, no extension agent, no person can tell you what nutrients are in that ground or what the soil pH level is just by looking at it. We do have to take those soil samples to see what is actually in the ground. So as far as when to sample, and this is specifically rooted or talking about home lawns. So you need to sample if you are creating a new type of lawn system prior to seeding, sprigging, or sodding, to allow incorporation of those nutrients in. If you're just maintaining a yard, then you can soil test at any time of the year, but do keep in mind you want to soil test early enough for those nutrients to be incorporated. You want to make sure that whenever you collect the soil, it is collected at a depth of 6 inches. Before you put the soil into a bag or a box, you make sure that that container is clean and dry. And then after you've taken your samples throughout that area, you you want to thoroughly mix those samples. We talk about how often. So if you are just doing those maintenance applications, we usually recommend every 3 to 5 years. Now, if your soil test is low in PRK, then we suggest to soil sample every year until you get those nutrients back into normal levels. So here's a picture of your sampling area. They should be collected at random. It can be, you know, here I've got 8 to 10 locations. It can be more of that. It can be less, dependent upon what size your lawn is. Also, if you have different management techniques for maybe your front lawn or your back lawn, you want to collect samples and send in 2 different soil boxes for, say, the front lawn and the back lawn. We have several different ways that we can actually conduct the sampling. We, at our extension offices, we have soil probes. It's a tube that just goes down into the ground and collects a cylindrical portion of the soil. You can use a shovel, you can use a spade. Sometimes people may use a trowel or an auger. So there's pictures on the right to describe those. Next, what I'm going to show you is a video that I put together a couple of years ago. Do keep in mind this video was made more towards like a hay pasture or a hay field. So whenever it talks about acres, just disregard that. But I'm going to play the video real quick. So that's just a quick video on how to actually conduct and take the soil samples. Pretty easy. You know, you just take your samples at random, put them in a container. You know, you may need to let them dry overnight, and then you put them in the box. I've got 2 links here. We at the UT Extension offices, we send those samples off to our soil, plant, and pest center. And they are the ones who actually run the lab. So the link here is the soil testing guide for lawns and gardens. It's pretty much what I had just shown you. And then here is a sample soil submission sheet. And this is the one for home, lawn, and gardens. So to begin with, to fill out a soil submission sheet, you just have to put in your individual information, where you put in your sample ID. So if your front lawn was a Bermuda grass mix, and then say your back lawn was more of a shaded area, so you've got fescue, you would take individual samples from the front lawn separately from the back lawn, because those 2 types of grasses require different maintenance systems. So what you would do on the first one, you would just type in Bermuda, and then your crop code when you look down here, so either a Bermuda or Zosia grass, you put in LB, and that's the only one you would use right here. Then for the second box that we submit, you could type in, maybe back. Or, here you could type front if that's the way you want to keep them, separate. So your front lawn will be tested for Bermuda grass. If that back lawn is, say, a fescue for those shaded areas, you would type in L. But let's say also that back there in your back lawn, you did want to put in a vegetable garden. So for the same price, for this same $15 price, you can put it to 4 different crop codes right here. So in the backyard, we're just going to pretend like we're going to put a vegetable garden as well. And all you do is you print this out, you submit it in to the soil lab along with your box of soil. Pretty easy. So what you will get returned back to you emailed. This is a copy of a soil report that was conducted this year. It was submitted back March 27th of this year. I kind of have blacked out some information, but on this soil report, what you will get back, you can see here, this soil pH was 6.19. Do not pay attention to that buffer value. The buffer value is only a number that the lab uses. So what you will see is here, this soil report, they had 138 phosphorus, 200 potassium, 3076 calcium, and then you get into some of the more micronutrients. So here at the bottom, it says recommendations. So the top one, this person had done a soil report for, like I was saying before, maybe their front lawn was that, Bermuda grass mix. So what they're recommending is 2 to 4 pounds of nitrogen. Their potassium was in a good range. Or phosphorus, I'm sorry, their phosphorus was in a good range. And then their potassium, they need just a small amount of potash or potassium. And on the soil report, it tells you that you need that many pounds per 1,000 square feet of your lawn. This sample in particular did not require any kind of lime. So they even go in depth on your soil report that you get. I'm not going to read all of it, but they tell you how many pounds to apply at what month of the year, at what time of the year. They break it out. So it's very, very doable. They kind of create your management schedule for you. And then if you, maybe still have some questions about a soil report, you can always contact your local UT Extension agent. So talking about those plant nutrients, the first one we're going to talk about is nitrogen. So this is the nutrient that kind of everybody talks about in fertilizer. It's going to be that first number on a fertilized bag. This is the nutrients that's required the greatest by lawns. One reason why it is required in greatest amounts is because it leaches pretty rapidly. It's also difficult to sustainably increase the soil reserves of nitrogen just because it does have those leaching abilities. So what does nitrogen do to our lawns or do for our lawns? It helps promote rapid plant growth. It encourages that dense lawn. And then also it produces that dark green color that we all like to see. So what can happen if our lawns have too much nitrogen? Of course, the lawn is not going to be able to tolerate influxes in temperature extremes. If it's near a high traffic area, it won't be able to withstand it, nor drought or disease. Also, too much can create those foliar burns whenever you get those brown tips. So, a deficiency in nitrogen, it can appear yellowish to light green because, of course, again, we talked about it produces that dark green color. Also, increased weed growth and greater susceptibility to diseases if they are deficient. So, in that top picture right there, that is a picture of dollar spot. So, this would be and then also the bottom picture is a deficiency as well. So, dollar spot, it, you know, lawns are more susceptible to dollar spot if it has a deficiency in nitrogen. Also, we talked about that lack of color. So the next kind of major nutrient that we talk about is phosphorus. Phosphorus is important whenever we're establishing or maintaining. So for establishment, those sprigs, those seeds, those sods, they need to develop a strong and fibrous root system. Phosphorus plays a very important role in developing those root systems. So for maintenance, if you are not seeding or sodding or sprigging, then, very modest amounts are required. Phosphorus is also very immobile in soils and does not leach readily. So if you have a lawn that is deficient in phosphorus, then you may see that your lawn is turning a reddish purple color or maybe a very dark green color. You can see on the right, that is a picture of a lawn that is phosphorus deficient. The next major nutrient that we'll talk about is potassium. So what role does potassium play in our lawn? Well, it increases resistance to diseases. It also improves the hardiness of lawns to temperature and moisture stresses. I know that whenever we get into, our hot summers here in Tennessee, our summers can get, 100 degrees or above, and we may go without rain for a couple of weeks. So potassium plays an important role in kind of keeping your lawn healthy. So for establish and maintenance of your lawn, adequate amounts of potassium are applied when it's established. And then for maintenance, just a small amount is required every year or every few years. So what does a lawn look like that is deficient in potassium? You can have browning of the tips or the margins. And then you can also have a yellowing of the grass blades with the mid veins remaining. So I did not have a personal picture of a potassium deficient lawn, but I did have some pictures of potassium deficient tomatoes and soybeans. So you can kind of see you've got the brown around the edges, and then you've also got that yellow mid-veining. So whenever we talk about fertilizers in general, we talk about where does that fertilizer come from, or what is our fertilizer source? So there's two main types of fertilizers. You can have complete or mixed, or incomplete or straight. So the first that we're going to talk about are complete or mixed. So these bags, I'll just refer to them as bags that you get, it contains all three of those primary nutrients of the N, P, and K. So whenever I say N, P, and K, that's the way they are listed on the bag. you'll see over on the right, the first number is always nitrogen, second number always phosphate, and the third number is always potassium, or a lot of times we may say potash. So if you ever hear me slip up and say potash, I'm just referring to potassium. So for example, if you have a 100-pound bag of a 6-12-12, then that 100 pounds is going to contain 6 pounds of nitrogen, 12 pounds of phosphate, and 12 pounds of potash. The next kind of fertilizer source that we have is an incomplete or straight materials. So a bag of this would only contain 1 or 2 of either the N, P, or the K. If only one nutrient is present, then that's whenever we say it's a straight material. So one of those examples of a straight material is ammonium nitrate. So it would only contain a nitrogen source. On those bags, a lot of times you'll see it say 34.5-00. So usually once soil test phosphorus and potash levels reach very high, then the long grass can be controlled with just a straight nitrogen fertilizer. But you still need to continue to soil test because we may need lime. So with those nitrogen sources, you may decide that you want to apply either a quick release or a slow release. And this is based upon kind of your lawn's needs and then your personal preference. So these quick release sources, of course, they readily dissolve in water. They are immediately available for plant use, and most of the time you can see your lawn respond, as quick as 3 days. This is usually the less expensive route to go. If you have those cool season grasses, then this may be the better option. Also, the quick release nitrogen sources, they do better, they respond better under cooler temperatures. And then also you can either mix them dry or as a liquid. The slow release nitrogen sources, of course, they're just right the opposite. They dissolve less rapidly, they break down over a period of, many days, over several months. Typically, these are more expensive. However, they more uniformly feed the grass. So this one also, you can apply at heavier rates to avoid the possibility of fertilizer injury or burn. And I've just got a chart down here at the bottom that just tells the quick and dirty between quick and slow release. Also, you can find bags that have a mixture of both quick and slow release. So right here, I've got some examples of nitrogen sources for lawns. Because you may hear people talk about, well, I'm going to put out some urea, or I'm going to put out ammonium sulfate, or I'm going to put out ammonium nitrate. This chart right here just kind of tells you what those formulations offer. So you can see urea has the highest concentration of quick release nitrogen, and then you get into some of these slower releases. You can see the sewage sludge. Of course, that's going to release the lowest amount of nitrogen. And then we talk about phosphorus and potassium sources. Um, a lot of this really kind of depends on what kind of grasses you have. Um, if you need phosphorus alone, then you may want to apply a triple superphosphate. I've got a rate of 0.460 listed right here. Or maybe you only need, potash added. So you can put, a rate of 0.060 out. Always with these, this is why we say soil tests are very, very important, because your soil test is going to tell you what rate is needed by your lawn in particular. So the chart over on the side, especially with your warm season grasses, if you are establishing a new lawn and it's before July 1st, you'll apply 1 pound of nitrogen 6 weeks after seeding, along with the potassium and potash. So whenever we talk about maintenance of cool season and warm season grasses, you noticed on that soil report, it told, specific dates, what time of year. Well, these charts right here kind of tell the same thing. So your cool season lawns, this would be, your fescue, your ryegrass type of lawn. You could break those nitrogen and other nutrients out into 5 different applications a year. Now again, like we said, breaking it out into that will give your lawn, it'll spread that nitrogen out so you have more applications during the year, so you decrease the risk of nitrogen burn. It also helps to decrease the susceptibility to weeds and diseases. So maintenance of warm season grasses, this would be, your Bermuda, your Zoysia. So we can break those applications down into 4 times a year. And here you will note that you have, 1 pound put out 4 times a year. Whereas on your cool season, you want to break those first 2 applications out into a 1/2 pound. So one of the other differences in the cool season and warm season grasses, while we do break those out, is because you want to limit your nitrogen application during those really hot, really warm times of the year, because you don't want to encourage the growth of those warm season lawn weeds. You want your fescue to keep going. You want your ryegrass to keep going, but you don't want to fertilize the weeds, and then you'll have a bigger problem. So we've kind of already talked about this. We're getting into some of the application methods now. So there's 4 things that we need to consider. What type of fertilizer you're going to put out, what kind of soil you have, what's your soil pH, what are your P and K levels, and then also what type of grass you are growing. So we've kind of already talked about, those quick release and slow release. Of course, we said that, higher rates cause foliar burn, but they can also, whenever you get, accelerated or really fast leaf growth, the roots may not be as developed. So that's one reason why we do want to space those fertilizer applications out. Also, this is where I was the 5th bullet right there. That's where I was kind of talking about, fertilizing will stimulate maybe crabgrass or other weeds. Um, and if you don't want those weeds in your lawn, stick to the proper schedule. So I've got here that your application of fertilizers should be made when the grass is dry. If possible, apply it before, one of those light soaking rains, or irrigate immediately after your fertilizer application. So the other factor to consider is your type of soil that you have. If you're in an area with heavy, fine textured soils, these usually contain large amounts of clay. So they are going to hold on to more nutrients than, say, your sandy soils. If you're in an area with sandy soils, or maybe your lawn, you have a lot of kids or pets or grandkids, and your lawn, it's a high traffic lawn. Then what you can do, you can broadcast, medium-sized granules that contain an extended release of your nutrients. This also reduces the potential for loss through leaching. The other factor that you need to consider when you're applying fertilizers is what type of grass species you have in your lawn. So I've listed on the right side the most common lawn species here in Tennessee. And you can kind of look at the nitrogen requirements. Of course, we all know our Bermuda grass, and then your creeping bentgrass and Kentucky bluegrass. They all require the most out of this list. More often than not, it's your warm season grasses that have a higher requirement for nitrogen than your cool season grasses. Also, whenever we're applying fertilizers, there are two main types. We have solid and or liquid or water soluble. So with our solid fertilizers, we can use, gravity flow or cylindrical spreaders. It is best to use those where you can. We can, apply those solid fertilizers by hand, but it's less desirable, just because you're more than likely going to get a better broadcast and coverage with one of the other spreaders. So we also have liquid or water soluble fertilizers. There is a greater potential for folio bird with these. These can be applied. I've got two listed at the bottom. One that you can hook in to your, water hose, or you can mix these into a pressurized sprayer. It is very important to remember to read the label. Only apply what is suggested by what's on the label of that package. So whenever we're applying either, with a handheld sprayer, with a pull behind, or even with a pressurized or hose sprayer, you always want to create some type of pattern, some type of system, just to avoid any kind of overlaps and skips. In the production ag world now, a lot of our tractors and planters and sprayers are guided by, GPS equipment, and that is to avoid overlapping. So to avoid over spraying, over fertilizing, and then it also helps to avoid skips, so areas that aren't covered. Over here on the right, there's just a pattern that you can use. This is more, for the by hand, type. So we often say, kind of walk up and down and then across. So liming, most soils here in the state of Tennessee do become acidic unless if lime is applied. And this is just due to, leaching, the application of nitrogen, and then also if we are removing our grass clippings with each cutting, it does increase acid into our soils. One thing that can easily be done is to, leave your grass clippings on your lawn. Don't use one of those, the bags behind your mowers. So as these acid levels do increase in our lawns, some nutrients become less available. And then your plant roots don't survive as well. It's just unfavorable. So lawns do become less hardy. Weeds also grow more prevalent. A lot of times people think that, you've got sage grass growing. That is not a visual indication of lime. What it is a visual representation of is an unfavorable environment for whatever grass species you want to grow. So the amount of lime that you put out is dependent all upon the soil pH. Well, as I said before, nobody knows what the soil pH is just by looking at it. You do need to take some type of soil test. So if your soil test comes back up and your acid content is low, of course, you're not going to need lime. That soil report will say that lime is not recommended. However, whenever your soil pH slowly kind of gets to that 6.0 level and below, then your acid levels increase and lime is recommended. So if you are seeding, sprigging, sodding a lawn, then your total amount of that lime needs to be incorporated into the soil prior to establishment. And then with maintenance of a lawn, your amount can be divided into 50-pound increments and applied at 6-month intervals. And what that is that's just so that your lawn has time to incorporate before, that growing point of the year. So lime applications, of course, can be made at any time during the year. However, late fall is preferred just so it can be incorporated before we get that spring kind of green up. It's best applied with a gravity flow spreader and those same patterns, just so we avoid overlapping or skips. But those same patterns can be used for lime as with fertilizers. And then now we've got these new type of pelleted limes. And you can use those cylindrical spreaders for those. So some of our sources for lime, whenever we mainly talk about lime, it's going to be ag or ground limestone. There's two types of ag or ground lime. We've got calcitic and dolomitic, and those contain calcium carbonate and also calcium plus some mag carbonates. I see I have a typo here. It is the most common form of bagged lime that we do buy. You can buy these in both bulk or in bags. So whenever you're at the store, you may also see hydrated lime. With the hydrated, this is more found at building stores, contracting, locations. These can easily irritate your skin and also may potentially cause foliar burn. Um, you only need to apply hydrated lime when your lawn is dry and when the temperatures are cool. So with hydrated lime, whatever your lime recommendation is, you only apply 3/4 of the amount recommended, and that's only if you're applying hydrated lime. And then no more than 25 pounds per 1,000 square feet should be applied to establish lawns. The third type of lime or lime source that we have in Tennessee is the pellet lime. So what this is the particles are compressed together to form kind of large pellets or large granules. A lot of times this can make the application a lot easier. However, with the pellets or granules, if they don't break down pretty quick with rain or irrigation, then their effectiveness is reduced significantly. So here I've just got, 3 types. Two of them are in just a, push behind or pull behind spreader. And then we've also got just the handheld spreader. Right here, these are some common sources of calcium and sulfur for your turf grasses. Um, you know, Listed here, like I was saying, you've got your, your calcium, there's your dolomitic lime. So what is listed here is what's their neutralizing value. So how well of a job they are going to do at neutralizing those acidic levels. And then we've talked about, your major nutrients, your N, P, and K. However, some people are concerned about their micronutrients. Um, on your soil test, you may ask for a micronutrient report too. So maybe your lawn is deficient in some of these other micronutrients. This chart can kind of tell you, what you may be able to put out. Um, we talk about boric acid sometimes. If your lawn is deficient in boron, you could put out boric acid. Maybe, excuse me, maybe you have an iron deficiency. And so right here, there's many, many different types of iron that you could put out. So what this chart kind of shows that I like is it shows what percent of that micronutrient is actually in that source. That's what I like looking at and comparing. So we have reviewed our macronutrients, how to fertilize our fertilized sources, our nitrogen sources, our P and K sources. If you do need some links to some other resources, we have UT Hort, which is uthort.com. Very simple. I refer this website to many, many homeowners. You can see here educational resources. There are many, many types of resources that they have. Specifically, since we are talking about turf grass and kind of lawns during this discussion, I, of course, did not get into insects. I did not get into diseases. I didn't get into weeds. So this resource right here kind of tells you more. There's 6 pages of all different ones. So maybe you may be looking at putting a zoysia out, even though I didn't talk in depth about, turf grass species. These, resources are out there for you. I just wanted to make sure that, you knew that. Also, UT Extension, we have a whole wealth of publications out there. Here is the UT Extension website. If need to look up anything dealing with agriculture, family consumer sciences, 4-H, just click one of these. Also, if you want to find your local county extension office, you click that link, and then here is every county in the state. So I'll click right here. I'm in Perry County, and you can find the information for your local, UT Extension office. You can find their contact information, whatever you need. And that is all that I have for today. Are there any questions?
No, but really good presentation, Amanda.